Hello Philip, this is Mashnu and here is the analysis of the game that you sent me. You played an interesting game. From a strategical point of view, it's I think very instructive. We see how you make use of this weakness on d6 and how you try to control the dark squares with your dark squared bishop. It's a nice game. Let's have a look move by move, and then we will come to this question that you asked me about the end game. You asked me if it was possible in the ending position to still win the game with white. Well, I'll come to that when we get there. Let's go move by move. You opened with c4 and your opponent played c5, so we have the English opening. This is the symmetrical variation. Knight to f3, knight to c6, and then you continue with d4, so opening the center immediately and looking for diagonals to develop your bishop, your dark square bishop. C takes d4, knight takes d4, and black continues developing with knight to f6, and you play knight to c3. Very logical moves, healthy development, and here your opponent continues with e6. So he is wanting to develop his bishop, his dark square bishop, and also e6 prepares the move d5. Now that's actually where your opponent went wrong. Just one move later, you played here knight d to b5. Of course, wanting to enter on d6, that's the hole that has appeared, and also an option would be to play, for example, at some point bishop to f4 to have some threats on c7. Now your opponent didn't react in the correct way. He should have played d5 here. That's this is the theoretical line for black here in this position, to play d5. Then mostly the game continues with bishop to f4, and then black pushes the e pawn to e5. Here comes a tactical part of this variation. White plays here c takes d5, and after e takes f4, white takes on c6, and after black retakes, then there is a queen trade, queen takes queen, king takes queen, and now a check on d1, rook d1 check. So developing, activating the rook with a tempo, winning a tempo, and after bishop to d7, white continues with knight to d6, threatening to take on f7. This is the theoretical line. This is the line that has been played by grandmasters. Now in the game, let's return to that position. Here your opponent made a big mistake, actually a positional mistake, by playing the move a6. With a6 he attacks your knight on b5, but there is this important square d6 that has been weakened. So you played knight to d6 check. He takes with the bishop, you take with the queen, and now black is not able to castle kingside because of the square f8 that is attacked by the queen, and still his light squared bishop is completely locked in. Your opponent played queen to e7 here, and you decided to trade the queens with queen takes e7. Perhaps it would have been a good option to play bishop to f4 instead of that. With bishop to f4, if black trades queens, then bishop takes d6, still black is not able to castle, and this rook is very difficult to bring into play, because the king cannot move forward to bring the rook to d8. In the game, you instead of bishop to f4, you took on e7 with check. Now retaking is forced, of course, and here you played bishop to e3. A very interesting move, in the sense that if black wants to let's say free himself from this position here, he would need to play d5 here to have some control in the center, try to open the d file and go with this rook to d8, for example. But here, because of bishop to e3, you would have then bishop to c5 check. A very annoying move for black, because his king doesn't have any good place to stand. I mean, going back to e8 would mean that he doesn't have the possibility of developing his rook to d8, and if the king goes to d8, well, more or less the same conclusion then happens. The king is actually using a square where the rook belongs in this position. So that's the interesting thing about this move, bishop to e3, that you played. Now, instead of d5, your opponent played d6. So taking away the square c5, going a bit slowly, perhaps preparing to play a rook to d8 and then d5. You reacted correctly here by playing your bishop to b6. This is important because you control the d8 square. So it becomes difficult again for black to continue with this plan of rook to d8. He tried to chase away your bishop with knight to d7, and now you continue with bishop to c7, still controlling d8 and something new, attacking the weak pawn on d6. So we need only one more piece attacking d6 and we are threatening to take it. Now knight to f6 played by black, and here you cancel queenside and the rook is placed on the right square. Your opponent found a way to defend this d6 pawn. He played knight to e8. Well, again, actually it would have been advisable here, I think, to play d5 for black, because he needs to do something about this cramped position, this weakness on d6. But he didn't do this. He didn't advance this pawn. Let's have a look. If you would take here, and he would take with knight, yeah, with knight, then knight takes knight, e takes knight, rook takes, and you have won a pawn. But the idea of black is that he would then be able to play with his pieces to get some piece activity here, and I think that that would be better than trying to not to lose material but to stay in this cramped position. That's actually what happened in the game. So here the rook is attacked. We need to play, let's say, rook to d3 or rook to d2, something like that. Let's see how this could continue. Well, he can regain the pawn immediately on a2, by the way, so it's not even a pawn sacrifice. He can regain it on a2 now. And now we need to try to develop this light square bishop. So e4, for example, here could be an idea. I think the position now is more or less equal, since black is now improving his pieces. Later his rook will go to c8 to chase away this bishop, I'm sorry, on c7, and see if he can play perhaps a rook to e8 or rook to d8. Let's return to the game, because this is what black should have done, to play d5 here. Now instead of d5 he played knight to e8. So he chose for a passive defense instead of an active defense. If you can choose between those two type of defenses, it's in 9 of 10 situations it's advisable to choose for an active defense. So here bishop to b6, knight to e5, attacking the c4 pawn, and here you play e4, the bishop on f1 defends c4, and we have these two strong pawns actually here. These two pawns control these very important squares. Oops, I'm sorry, like this, and this is actually tying black and preventing his natural development. So these pawns have a strong grip on the black position. Knight to d7 played now. The bishop on b6 is under attack. You bring it to e3, and now he plays b6, wanting to bring his bishop to b7. Slowly trying to develop. I actually expected that you would play here f4, since a pawn on e4 and a pawn on f4, they would be really a nice pair of pawns here, controlling the center completely. And perhaps looking eventually later at options of playing f5 or to open the center, since the black king is still in the center. I think f4 looks like to me like a very natural way of continuing this position. So after knight f6, for example, then bishop e2 developing, and then perhaps later this bishop can go to f3 to place it on this diagonal here. Let's see, bishop to b7, bishop to f3, something like this. This pawn is very well defended now, and the f pawn controls e5. I think this would be, it looks like a very healthy position for white. Let's return to the game, because in the game you didn't play f4, you played bishop to e2, and your opponent continued with bishop to b7. I have been looking, by the way, here at the option for black of playing b5 to see if he can free his position, because this looks so cramped, and I thought perhaps if he sacrifices a pawn here with b5, c takes b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5, and then knight to c7 attacking the bishop, and if the bishop goes away, for example, to a4, well, let's say the position is still better for white. These two passed pawns here can later in the endgame become very dangerous, but at least black would have created some open files here to place his rooks on b8 and c8 perhaps, and things like that, but I don't think it's enough. Still white is standing better, so this pawn sacrifice with b5 is an idea to look at, but I don't think it's a way of saving the game for black, of improving the game. Bishop to b7 he played. You continue with rook to d4, so supporting a bit more the pawn on e4 and on c4, but perhaps more important, wanting to double up the rooks, rook h to d1, and then have again more pressure against d6. Here he played a bishop to c6, and you continued with king to b1, bringing the king out of the c file and defending a tumor. This is a move that we see in many grandmaster games at center point, and after castle and queenside they play king to b1, and it's of course it's a very safe move. You bring your king to safety. At the same time, it doesn't do much at the moment. There is not really a direct threat against the king, so perhaps in this type of positions it's an idea to look at again at moves like f4 to have more grip in the center and prevent the freedom of your opponent even more. Well, let's return to the game. King to b1, nothing wrong with it, but you could play more active with f4, let's say, put it like that. Knight to c5 played now, and here you play f3 to support the e pawn, and he plays knight to c7. Rook h to d1 now, according to your own plan, of course, like this, having more pressure now against d6, and your opponent places his rook h to d8. He moves, so defending d6. This is actually the problem of black during actually since the opening. D6 is what it's all about. Now here you gave a check on g5 like that, and he played f6, and I think perhaps this is sorry, instead of bishop to g5, it's interesting to see if we can find something more, because this check on g5 after f6, you have to return to move the bishop again, and then we can say that in this position it's white to move, and after this it's black to move. So you haven't improved your position, and we can say we have lost the tempo, because now it's black to move. So it's not easy to find a good alternative. One plan could be to, for example, move rook to d2 and then bishop to f4. We cannot play bishop to f4 right now because of the fork e5. Yeah, so an idea could be to first move the rook away, so rook to d2, and then after, let's say, rook a to b8, continue with bishop to f4. Let's see what happens then. If you place e5, it's no problem, because now this d6 pawn is really very weak. This is going to be a weakness that he cannot solve, because he cannot advance the d pawn any longer. So perhaps this would be a plan that can give white more chances to fix this d6 pawn, so have a static advantage, let's say a long-term advantage, this weakness on d6. Let's go back. This is where we left, so I think here this could be a way of playing the position a bit better than what happened in the game. Bishop to g5 check, f6, bishop to h4, and now here your opponent played, well, not a very active move, rook to d7. He wants to play this other rook to d8, that's clear, but it's very slow. Let's see, bishop to g3, so again you direct your pieces against d6, and here your opponent, instead of playing the rook to d8, that would be a very logical continuation, because that's what he plays his rook to d7. Instead of doing this, he continued with e5, and I think e5 is inferior, because of this same idea that this pawn on d6 now will have to stay on d6 forever, it looks like, because it's impossible to advance it to d5. It's not supported any longer. Rook to d2, knight to e6, bishop to f2, controlling d4, very important. You see this knight wanting to jump here. Knight goes to f4, and now bishop to f1, keeping the pair of bishops, and then later you can chase away this knight with g3, and that's what happens in the game. Rook to b8, g3, and the knight goes to e6 back. Here you played bishop to h3, rook d to d8, so black, it seems like black doesn't know what to do, and now you gave a check on d5. Actually you have clearly a better position here, and it's actually very difficult to make a decision here. What the strategy would be is needed actually to maintain this advantage. Knight to d5 is very logical, in the sense of this square d5 is a hole. It's made for a knight, and after he takes, of course, you have a choice here how to retake, with the e pawn, with the c pawn, and you decided, you could also have taken with a rook, by the way, to maintain pressure on d6, but you decided to take with the c pawn. It's understandable in the sense that now we open the c file and you have control over e6. This knight must move away. The bishop goes to g2. Yeah, it has to go to g2. Yeah, I'm thinking about my previous sentence that I said you have control over e6, but in fact it's no, that's not correct what I'm saying, in the sense that there is no option to make use of that, this e6 square. I thought perhaps you could at some point play bishop to e6 and then try to open the c file and enter with a rook on c7, but that's just a fantasy idea, I think, at the moment. Well, let's continue with the game. Rook d to c8, he places the rooks on this open file, and now you play h4, chasing this knight away. The knight goes to f7, and now bishop back to h3. Good idea now, in the sense that it's about the c8 square. If the rook moves away, then he will not be able to double up the rooks on the c file. So this is a very from a strategical point of view, a very interesting move, bishop to h3. He placed knight to do d7, and now of course a rook to c1, not to give away this c file. He takes on c1, you take with the king, and here he plays a5, and you take with your bishop on d7. Now by taking on d7, I'm not very happy about this. Bishop takes d7, since this bishop is actually a very important piece in this position, since it's controlling all the slide squares here, and it will do that in the rest of the let's say going towards an endgame. It's important to have also control over these slide squares. Perhaps you thought, I don't know, perhaps you thought that in an endgame this would be your bad bishop because of the fixing of the pawns here, like this. But in fact, this bishop also controls the c8 square, so the rook cannot go to c8 later. I do understand that this knight is placed in between, but after rook to c2, for example here, that would be my my move. If you place knight to c5 to block the rook, we would slowly have to improve our position. Let's see, perhaps playing a3, is that an idea? a3 and b4, or if you play a3, perhaps he plays a4. Is that correct? If you place a4 here, or he has knight to d3 check, and the taking on f2. Let's have a look at that. If we allow it and we go to d1, he takes here with check, rook takes. Still he cannot play rook to c8, so perhaps rook to b7 to play rook to c7, but we are faster. We play rook to c2 here. Now if he wants to play rook to c7, he will have to play king to d8, leaving a weakness here on d6, so perhaps rook c6 here, threatening bishop to e6, attacking the knight, the defender of d6. So I think this is a correct thing to do. Let's see, if you place this, no, then we take on b6, of course, so this rook actually cannot go to the c file. This looks interesting, this variation. I'm just looking at it now. So it's about the move rook to c2 instead of taking this knight on d7. It would be actually more consistent to play rook to c2 to control the c file, threaten to enter on c7, a very annoying threat for black because of this pin that then happens on d7. Well, let's say that this would be a would give good chances for white, and I think it is not a good thing to take on d7 here. He takes, of course, back, and then you go with the rook to c2. The knight goes to d8, king to d2, bring the king to a more active position. He plays b5 now. Bishop to a7 attacks the rook goes to b7. Bishop goes back. So I get the impression with these moves, bishop a7 and bishop back to e3, I have the impression that you didn't quite have a clear plan here how to continue this, and it is also quite difficult, by the way, to find a good plan now, since black is controlling these important entry squares for white, so it's not easy for white to enter into black's position. Let's see, black plays g6, king to d3. Bringing the king to the center is of course never wrong, but we don't have a really clear winning plan. I think he plays a4, h5. Okay, now something is happening. You're trying to open the queen side. Of course, taking for him would be a mistake, because then the h file becomes very important, rook h2, and then everything falls there. So he saw this and he played g5, keeping the queen side closed, and in this position you played f4, and here you write that this was a league game, and your team captain talked with the captain of the opponent's team, and the standing at this moment was 3.5 against 3.5, and this was the last game of the match, and they decided to propose a draw here, so that's how the game ended. And well, this is something that this happens so now and then in league matches, that the captains talk with each other and start let's say negotiating about this kind of things. According to the rules officially, nobody is allowed to decide the about a draw offer in a game. What captains are allowed to do is to give you advice, but they are not allowed to decide it. What mostly happens in these situations is that a player who receives a draw offer, he goes to his team captain and he tells him, I have a draw offer, can you give me advice? The captain looks at the score of the match at that moment and then tells you, I advise you to accept it, or I advise you to continue if you see winning chances. And I don't know exactly how this happened in this match that you play, where you played this game, but here is actually where the game ended. And you asked me in your email whether white has winning chances here. Well, I must say white has a better position because of the rook on the open file, because of the weakness on d6, weakness on b5 as well, but it's not easy to find a way to win. I don't see any force to win here. In a game, if I would be playing white here and I would have enough time on the clock, I would continue just to try something, to try if we can improve our position, because winning chances for black are far away. You don't need to be afraid that black will turn the tables very easily here. It's just his position is still inferior. Let's have a look. For example, if black plays now knight to f7, activating his knight a bit more and defending, of course, here g5. If you take on g5, he takes back with the f-pawn, so we have a new open file. A plan is what we need. A plan could be to try to walk with our king to b4, and let's say we need to play a3 first to prevent b4, and rook to c6 to keep pressure on d6, and eventually threaten to play rook to b6 at some point perhaps. Let's say rook to c6 here. If knight to d8, we need to move the rook away. Let's go to a6, still having pressure on d6, so keeping it on this 6th rank. If black goes now again to f7, we could play bishop to let's say bishop to d2, or perhaps opening the position with b3 here. b3, let's try this. We are threatening to win a pawn on a4. If it takes, of course we'll retake, oops, like this, and we have again a possible plan of going with our king to b4 to attack b5 one more time. Of course we need to be careful about this rook entering this way, so it's quite complicated. Let's see, we cannot play rook to c7 right now, I think, because of rook to b6 and then simply this falls. This rook cannot enter unless our king is on b4, then he can enter with a rook to c2. Let's see, what if he waits rook to b8 and we go with the king to c3? Rook c8 check. Can we dare to go to b4, or does it look too It looks risky, doesn't it? I mean, we could go back now to d2, but then we haven't improved our position. If we try to win, like this, then rook to c2. I'm not sure about this. These are really scary, scary decisions. Because trying to win this game, oh, he has rook to c3 already, attacking the bishop. So this is actually not possible even to try to win immediately this. This b5 pawn. Well, let me simply tell you the conclusion is that, at least my conclusion here, is that it's a very difficult endgame. White has a better position, but as you see, if we try to force a win, we immediately give also chances to black. So it's really not easy to convert this in a win. So on one hand, I understand the decision of your captain, the advice of your captain to make this a draw. On the other hand, I do understand also very well your question: could I have won this? Well, my answer is that you do have a better position, but it's certainly not easy to win. Now, in practice, if you're playing against an opponent of your own strength, then of course you have chances, practical chances that he makes a mistake. And I think it's easier if we are not too greedy with white. If we slowly try to improve this position, it's perhaps easier for black to make a defensive mistake at some point. So, alright, anyway, this was a very interesting game. The about this weakness on d6 all the time, that's really a very instructive idea, I think. So this is what I have to say about this game. I wish you lots of luck and hope to see you again on YouTube. Alright, I'll say goodbye now. Thank you.